Hi guys, welcome to the video on simple interest. This is our last lesson on the percent unit, and this is one that has a lot of applications to real life because as you get older, you will have to buy things on credit. You get out credit cards, and you'll have money in the bank that's going to grow interest. So you'll want to at least be knowledgeable about the basics of how it works. So this lesson is about simple interest. There's something called compound interest too, and sometimes different situations use different ones. Simple interest is compounded yearly, meaning you find the interest rate once a year, and compounded interest is compounded sometimes more frequently than that. So here's our example, or here's our formula. It's I equals PRT. You'll hear people say PERT a lot of the time. It just means that interest is equal to principal times rate times time. And that time has to be in years. And we'll talk about some examples that it does give you in years, and sometimes it won't give it to you in years. They'll give it to you in months, maybe. Interest rates vary anywhere between, 0.5 or 1 or 2 up to, even 18, 19, 20% for some credit cards. So you'll definitely want to check the interest rate. Obviously, when you're trying to gain interest on things, you'll want to have a low percentage of interest. I'm sorry, a high percentage when you are gaining money, and you'll want to have a low percentage of interest when you have something that you're paying for on credit. Okay, so this is just a couple examples of just the basics of the formula and what each thing means. We have interest, which means how much you're getting from putting in money to the bank, or how much the bank is making off of you. Principal is how much you put in or how much you borrow. And then the rate is what the interest rate is, and that can vary. And then time is usually T, which is in years. So here's our first example. You put $500 into a savings account. The account earns 3% simple interest per year. What is the interest earned after 3 years? And then what is the balance after 3 years? So there's a lot of different variables and different vocabulary words here. You're always going to want to look for the first thing that's P. That's what you put in. So in this case, it's 500. That's the principal amount that you deposit into your savings account. I'm going to write that formula down. I equals P times R times T. So we have the principal so far is 500. Our rate is our 3%. And just like we've seen a lot of times in this percent unit, we're actually going to write that as a decimal 0.03. And then T is our time, which is 3 years. Now when you're writing this down in your paper, I want you to start with your formula, and we're going to substitute everything in below. We're going to find the interest for $500 for P. Our rate is 0.03, and our time is 3 years. So we're simply going to multiply all of those things. All right, we're going to go ahead and multiply each of those things to figure out what our final answer is. So if you type that into your calculator, let me get that out here real quick. Where'd it go? There it is. Okay. We're going to type that into our calculator. We're just going to literally put in 500 times 0.03 times 3. Let's see what that gives us. 45. So that gives us 45. And that actually means $45. That's how much the interest is in 3 years. You might seem like, that's not very much. But, over time that certainly adds up. So the interest is $45, that's part A. But part B says, what's the balance after 3 years? So the banks are putting that amount of money in for you. So we want to add that back to our principal. P plus I will give us our balance. So it's 500 plus 45. And that answer is $545. It's in your bank account. So you got $45 for doing nothing other than having the money sit in the bank. Not too bad. You'll find that most savings accounts at banks, at least mine, only gives me a couple pennies every time I get some interest, so it's not too much. It's a low percentage of interest. All right, I'd like you to try number 1 and number 2 and push pause there. We're going to write down I, P, it's not I, P, principal, R, rate, and T, time. So I like to kind of set each of those things up and then plug it into our formula. Okay, go ahead and try that. Push pause and give that a try. Okay, number one here. We have our principal, which is $600. That's what we put into the bank. 5% is 0.05. And 2 years, t equals 2. So when we plug all that in, 600 times 0.05 times 2, what we end up getting is $60 of interest. It says find the balance afterwards. We're going to do P plus I, principal and interest together, is 600 plus 60, for a grand total of $660. Number two, the principal, what you put in, is $1,800. Rate is 0.065, and T is 3 years. So it's I equals PRT. We have 1,800 times 0.065 times 3. When you do the math there, we get an interest of $351. We'll add that back to the principal, 1,800 plus 351, and that gives us a total of $2,151. Okay. Number three, same type of thing here. We're going to do 700. Actually, let me start with our formula again. I equals P times R times T. So we have 700 times 0.18 times 5. Now this is probably an example. If you see that really big interest rate, this is probably a credit card. Okay, and I've opened up a couple credit cards. My wife and I share one, and then we just bought some furniture, so we put that on a credit card and then give you a whole year to pay it off without any interest. But then what they do is, if you actually look at the fine print, is after a year, if you still have a remaining balance, they bump up the interest rate to over almost, I think it's 18 or 20%. Very high interest rate for that amount of money. So if we look at this and multiply it out, what we actually end up getting for our rate on this one, or our interest, is $630. So look at that. You borrowed $700, and then you actually have to pay back $630 in addition. So really, you have to pay both of these together. So that's actually quite a lot of money. What you actually end up having to pay back overall in the course of your loan or your credit card there is $1,330. A lot of money after 5 years there. Now obviously if you pay it off in a shorter amount of time there, you won't pay as much in interest. But 18% interest doesn't sound like a lot maybe, but it really is. Alright, number four. We have $5,200 at 7.36% for 54 months. It says, what's different about this problem? Well, this one is in months. But our problem is we have to put this formula, this I equals PRT formula, only works for years. So, if we have 12 months, that's equal to 1 year. 24 months is equal to 2 years. 36 months is equal to 3 years. What we're actually doing to get that is dividing by 12. So in this one, to find T, we're going to take our 54 months and divide it by 12 to see how many years that gives us. And it might be a decimal, but we'll see what happens. 54 divided by 12 gives us 4.5 years. So we actually have to use 4.5 and not 54. So we're going to do I equals PRT. We have 5,200 times 7.36% is 0.0736. And our time in years, we found out, was 4.5. So we have to multiply all this out. When we do all this math here, we end up getting $1,722.24. So the grand total here, when we add that back into our principal, is $6,922.24. Okay? So whenever you have months given to you, you actually have to divide it by 12 to figure out what the years is. You could even do it in days. Technically, they could say, how much is it for 180 days? You could take 180 and divide it by 365. All right, so now in this case it says, tell whether you would want a higher interest rate or a lower interest rate. And we kind of talked about this a little bit. It says if you borrow money. Well, if you're borrowing money, you have to pay back interest. So when you're borrowing money, you want a low interest rate. Okay, if you're buying a house, like the mortgage on my house, I want a pretty low interest rate. Way back, quite a few years ago, the interest rates for homes just to get a mortgage was about 17%, 15%, really high. My interest rate is below 5%. Okay, and that would probably shock a lot of your parents and grandparents because they were so high. But now they're actually pretty low, and even now you can see advertisements for like 3.5% and things like that. And that's all depend on like the market and how that things are changing. And B, it says you open a savings account. To open up a savings account, you obviously want to get money. You want to gain interest. So the more interest you gain, the more free money you're getting just by having your money in a bank account. That's good. You want a high interest rate. Okay. Obviously for credit cards, you want low. For anything that you're buying, you want a low interest, or anything that you're borrowing, like a car loan, anything like that, you want low interest rates. You'll even see on TV, 0.9% APR. That APR stands for annual percentage rate. Okay, so you want to look at those things and just be aware of them. Last thing is kind of a challenge. It says you put in $400 into an account. So P is $400. The account earns $18 in interest, and the time is 9 months. You want to find the rate. So this is one that's different. If we set it with our formula, we know the interest. We know the answer. So we know it's 18 after putting in $400. We don't know what the rate is, but we do know that T is 9 months, which remember before, 9 months, we have to divide that by 12 to figure out how many years that is. Now you can kind of go and kind of guess and check and see what's happening here, but what we're going to do, and this is kind of, we haven't done equations yet, but we're going to go ahead and multiply these two things together. 400 times 9/12. And 9/12 is really 0.75. And this is kind of solving equations. We're actually going to multiply these two things together. 3/4 of 400 is 300. And now actually to get r by itself here, it's times r. We actually are going to divide by 300. And this will make more sense later on when we're doing equations. But if you do 18 divided by 300, you get 0.06. And that's the interest rate. And you can actually check it on your calculator. Do 400 times 0.06 times our 0.75 for years, or 3/4. When you do that, you should get your $18. Okay? Thanks for listening, guys. This was our good little introduction on interest rates, but we will see you tomorrow.